Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's go for it. What's the scariest experience you've ever had that you cannot explain? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A very lifelike dream where an unseen entity pinned me on my bed and shoved my phone down my throat. I woke up with my fingers down my throat trying to dislodge it, not realizing it was on the charger on the nightstand. I was a teen, not under any substance, laying in my bed, suddenly fell in some kind of reality shift. TV sound was distorted, time felt slowed down, saw two silhouettes by the bedroom door, dark but outlined in bright yellow light, an adult and a kid. Still gives me the shivers. Kind of scary, and didn't happen to me but to my mom more than 20 years ago. My mom worked at the now defunct American Stock Exchange for over 25 years, so she'd accrued a lot of PTO over time. When she was trying to use some of it to take one full work week off for an end of summer vacation, she said that a voice inside her head was basically screaming at her to break her week up. When the screaming wouldn't stop, she went to her manager at the last minute to say that she wanted to take individual days off. Her manager kinda side-eyed her but complied. One of the days that she ended up having off as a result of changing her PTO was around September 11th, 2001. The building that her job was located in was a few hundred feet from the towers, and the PATH train that my mom took every morning to the World Trade Center stop would have pulled up at nearly the exact moment one of the planes hit the North Tower. The nagging voice in her head saved my mom's life. I was looking through my then brother-in-law's graduation yearbook. I saw a photo of his friend in the book. I'd never met the guy, only heard brother-in-law's stories about their endeavors. Brother-in-law came by. I mentioned seeing said friend in the yearbook. He went through the book looking for the guy's photo. Couldn't find it. Not there. I looked. He looked. Several others looked. No photo. Found out later that day that his friend had been accidentally killed at the same time I saw the now non-existent photo. I know I saw him. I described him to my brother-in-law to a T. Photo has never reappeared in the yearbook, and his friend received his degree posthumously. I can't explain it. Me and my friend saw a ghost of a dog. Let me preface with saying that their house and her father were both equally bone-chilling creepy. Father spent his days on surveillance cameras planted around the outside of the house, paranoid someone would break in. The house was massive, but made no sense whatsoever. Every floor, there were 3, had a staircase and a metal bar locked every night. If someone broke in, then they would be limited to only one floor this way. I hated being there, staying over, having dinners, parties, just pure creepy. But one day, my friend called and said one of her dogs died. She had 2 white poodles that to me looked mostly identical, and one of them passed from cancer. We put him in a shoebox and buried him in the garden, made some flower crowns. She begged me to stay overnight, and I did. We both woke up at about 4 in the morning. We slept in one bed right before dawn. There was a dog at the foot of our bed. We pet him, played a bit, gave him a little fuss. Both of us played, touched the dog, and interacted. The dog ran toward the staircase, so we went to let him go down as they had food and water bowls in the kitchen 2 floors down. There was no dog on the staircase. We whispered his name and had a look around the floor but couldn't find him. The metal bars were too close together for the dog to squeeze through. We shrugged and went to get a drink and maybe an early breakfast. We went 2 floors down, opening the metal gates, and then opened the door to the kitchen. There, on the dog bed in the corner, woke up her poodle, stretched and demanded fuss from us. The kitchen had closed doors that the dog could not open. The gates on the floor were closed. I took a first bus home. I never came back to the house, never talked about it with my friend. She got into a new circle of friends who were not my type, and we grew apart. I'll accept any explanation that makes sense, as it's been 20 years, and I've not found one. Again, if it's going to be a paranormal entity, I'll take a happy, smiling puppy any day. I was haunted by a shadow man since childhood. It used to paralyze me awake in bed. Doorknobs and locks used to twist at night. Occurred all the way up to adulthood and beyond. Hasn't happened for a while, but the last 2 instances were at 18 and 31. One night when I was 18, I was staying up watching TV. I sat on the sofa that faced a large window. You could see your whole reflection in at night. I remember looking at my reflection, waving, then going back to the TV. It was I realized that the reflection didn't wave back at me. I turned back and waved again. This time, the reflection waved back. The last occurrence was at about 31. I sleep with my bedroom door locked and facing it. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, the door wide open. I was frozen still. Couldn't move or make a sound. Then the shadow of a head creeps over the doorway. Then the next second I was awake, in the morning, with the door still open. So yeah, I thought I was crazy, until my brother told me he had been seeing a shadow person throughout his life, a little girl. This happened when I was about 5, living in an apartment with my mom, who at the time was 21, and my baby brother. Now, I don't believe in the paranormal, never did. At least not any more than I would believe that my face would get stuck if I kept it that way, but this story always leaves me wondering. Mom could finally afford to move my brother and I into an apartment complex instead of a cheap roach-infested motel. I remember the day we went to look at this new apartment with the landlord. We were in the living room, and he was talking about how the carpet had just been installed and how there were small issues with the heating, yada yada yada. While he was rambling on to my mom, I was bored and decided to lean on the wall, only to realize my hands, arms, and back were covered in white paint. I thought it was weird, and Mom said they just repainted it so it would be extra special for us, right? Being the naive kid, I thought nothing more, and we moved in shortly after. Soon, we were all settled in, but that apartment always gave me a sense of unease for some reason. It always felt like someone was with me, even when I was surrounded by my family. I just chalked it up to giving myself the spooks, but one day Mom and I were watching TV, and across the room was a laundry hamper. While we were watching, the hamper just fell over on its own. Nothing to knock it over, nobody near it, nada. At the time, Mom and I thought, weird. Then moved on, but looking back, I don't know how Mom kept her cool. The second incident happened while I was doing tummy time with my brother, and my mom was making lunch. Everything was fine until we heard glass shattering coming from Mom's room. Mom and I ran into her room, and the coffee table at the end of her bed had been completely shattered to bits. It wasn't holding much, and prior to that was capable of holding both me and my brother. Mom was confused but stayed calm and said she'd clean it later and to stay out of her room. Those were the only 2 incidents I witnessed, and my mom remembers. We moved out when I was 7 into a much better neighborhood, and I'd mostly forgotten about that apartment, at least until the memory popped in my head again when I was 20. I casually began to reminisce about the place with my mom and mentioned how weird that place seemed at times. Then, she hit me with a huge bombshell, and I'll never forget this conversation. Mom, well, I think I know the reason the apartment always felt off. OP, what's up? Mom, you know how cheap I said it was? OP, yeah. Mom, well, I think it was because a woman was murdered there about 3 weeks prior. OP, Mom, her boyfriend got very drunk one night and started beating her. She tried running out the door, but he hit her head with a hammer until she died. OP, where? Mom, the living room. That conversation shook me to my core, even more so when I realized that the reason the carpet was new and the walls had been painted was probably to clean up the crime scene. Mom said that the landlord did tell her that someone had been murdered there, but she had to find out how from the neighbors. She also said that even though she also didn't believe in the paranormal, knowing someone was murdered in that small apartment and witnessing those 2 occurrences scared her on a level she didn't know was possible. I still wouldn't say I believe in that stuff, but I never could explain what was up with that place.
Well, rent's not cheap nowadays, so if you're cool with it, it's a deal. Just terrible that happened.
I, a man, was out clubbing with some girls. Someone brought one of the girls a drink. Being a smartass, I snatched up the drink and guzzled it. Turned out it was drugged, and I woke up the next day with no memory and a brain fog that left me not knowing what was going on for about 6 hours. I like to look back and think I saved that chick a lifetime of pain. I have this uncanny, skill of sorts. I subconsciously think of an event that will happen in the future, with me and certain people, and I'll think of the dialogue that will take place and where the entire interaction will take place. And then it actually happens, down to the word, down to the location, down to the people. And when it does, my body gets this feeling of familiarity. I guess the word would be, it's hard to describe. I know I saw something on Reddit where people experienced something similar, and there was a name for it, but I forget what it is. But it's like I can accurately predict the future without even consciously doing it. It just happens randomly, but always whenever I'm alone. One night I was woken up from sleep by a sharp, piercing, echoey yelp, a little like a dog. It felt ethereal. I got up and checked on my wife and son, then checked all the doors of the house to make sure they were locked. I was unnerved and awake for quite a while. This is not normal behavior for me. I even told my wife about it in the morning, and she noted it wasn't like me at all. The next day, we get a call from my sister-in-law saying that our 3-year-old son had fallen off a footbridge into a very cold stream. It was wintertime. My wife and I raced to them. As we're walking to my sister-in-law's car, where she was warming him up, I hear a loud, piercing yelp. I ask my wife, "Is that?" insert son's name. It wasn't. It was a dog locked in a car right next to us. It wasn't until I had made sure my son was okay that I connected the dots between the nighttime yelp and the one we heard approaching the car. They sounded very similar. And yes, son ended up being okay. I know people will say it was sleep paralysis, and yes, that's partially true, but I can't explain what I was feeling during this moment. I was maybe 7 or 8 and taking a nap in my room. I woke up, but I couldn't move at all, and I felt another presence in my room. I couldn't see or hear this person, but I could tell I wasn't alone. Then they crawled on top of me and kissed me on the cheek. I tried to scream or move, but I could barely move an inch. They finally disappeared and I could move again. I don't want to tell anyone in real life because they'll probably say I'm demon-possessed or whatever. When I was in college, I was randomly sick in the dorm, and my first semester living on my own. I took NyQuil at night and went to bed. I ended up waking up at 2 or 3 a.m. I don't know what happened, but I was like hallucinating odd colors during my sleep. I ended up waking up with my comforter soaked with sweat. It felt like a puddle. It honestly was one of the scariest experiences in my life because I was like, what the F is wrong with me? My comforter was so swamped with sweat, I ended up taking my comforter right there to the laundry and washing them. No idea what caused it, fever broke, but felt maybe I took too much NyQuil, even though I doubt it. Just odd, I was up, like hallucinating. I don't do drugs. Ended up feeling better a few days later. I'm going to assume I just had the flu or something and maybe the NyQuil didn't agree with me. I never take NyQuil now. Somewhat predicted my grandfather's death in a dream the night before he died. For context, I do not have a relationship with my grandparents. They were severely abusive to my dad or other extended family, and I had not seen or spoken to my grandfather since I was a toddler. So this dream was extremely out of the blue, and there's literally no way I could have known he had died or had even been in bad health. In 2020, one of my neighbors put out some sort of rodent poison around the block because we were having a little rat issue. I presume the robins got some of that stuff because they started acting weirder than a mother effer. They acted as if they weren't scared of anything. I would play basketball in the street, and they would just be sitting on the curb watching me. If the ball would bounce near them, they wouldn't move, and when I'd come to grab the ball, they'd just squawk at me loudly. They wouldn't fly away no matter how close I got. They'd sit on the curb for hours and hours. I no longer F with robins. Was home alone and sitting in the lounge, reading at around 11:40 p.m., heard loud and distinct footsteps in the spare bedroom directly above me, walking purposefully and at normal pace across the room from the door end towards the window end of the room, stopping where the window would have been. Panicked that it must be an intruder, then realized they must have been in the house, completely silent upstairs for at least 2 hours from when I locked the back door, which seemed bizarre and unlikely. Luckily, my husband came home just as my mind was racing. I got him to search the house. Needless to say, there was no one there, and nothing out of place. People I have mentioned it to have suggested that it might have been something to do with the heating, but no, the heating wasn't what I heard. We were spending our holiday in a bungalow. My family wanted to explore the nature surrounding the bungalow. I didn't want to because I had that feeling that something bad would happen. They didn't listen to me, and we went out. When we were closing the outside door of the bungalow's garden, I felt a headache and saw a vision: a pit bull, two German shepherds, and a street dog. We walked a bit, and then I saw my farmer's house protected by the dogs I mentioned. They started barking at us. We turned and started walking to the road, which we came from. They followed us, touched us, barked us until we got really far away. I always have deja vu, but seeing a vision from the future is something that made me understand time isn't like what we think it is. Everything is happening at the same time.
I wonder if it's like deja vu, some type of sixth sense tapping into our own like deep subconscious. Maybe you're right. Maybe time is not linear. Who knows? But, glad you made it out okay.
One morning when I was 11, I woke up at about 5 a.m. and went to the kitchen. When I was in the kitchen, the back door knob started turning and jiggling. I was in shock and didn't approach the door for a minute or so. But there wasn't anybody in the door window that I could see, and I couldn't see anything else when I looked closer. I didn't dare open the door though. I told my dad, who was up about 15 minutes later, but I don't think he bought it. I don't know. There's always every possibility my brain has reinvented what happened, but I'm so certain that something had turned that doorknob. I sometimes wonder about that, but why would I have been so startled in the first place then? The only animal I could think of that could turn a knob is a black bear, which would have been pretty noticeable. So what was it? Did my brain just go crazy? Was there some hunched lunatic sneaking around a stealthy bear? Or was it ghosts? It's been 24 years, and I'm still very uneasy about that door to this day.